Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Inner Shift podcast. Just me and Jesse today, just our beautiful faces. So, today we're going to talk about food noise, and this is very fitting, just being the time of the year around the holiday season. So, we figure that it's a very appropriate topic, and we're excited to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna kick it off by kind of explaining a little bit about food noise because a lot of people out there don't really understand it. Um, Food noise is a very difficult thing to explain to somebody who doesn't have it or doesn't deal with it. Um, and the easiest way I can put it is to think about if you were absolutely broke, you have $5 in your bank account, and you wake up and tomorrow rent is due. Everything you do, everything throughout your day, when you walk outside, you go to work, you go to make dinner, everything throughout the day, all you're thinking about is how am I getting this money? How am I going to pay my rent? What am I going to do? And your entire day you are stressed, you are struggling, and you don't know how you're going to get, you don't know how you're going to pay your rent, you don't know how you're going to get by. And for people that deal with food noise, that is what it's like all day, every day. You are stressed and you are struggling. You are thinking about food constantly. Just like in that situation where you're thinking about money all day and how am I going to get money? Somebody that's struggling with food noise is struggling thinking about food. They're thinking, what not even necessarily like when is my next meal or I really need this food or that food. It's often even in my case now, having lost a lot of weight, for me, my food noise is now all about numbers. It's all about, how much calories are in this. Can I eat that? Can I fit this into my diet or that into my diet? And food noise in general is essentially just loud noise in your head. Everybody has that subconscious voice, or at least vast majority of humans have that subconscious voice. And it's essentially when that voice is just all about food all the time. And it's very difficult for people that don't deal with that to understand, because if you, much like the financial situation, if you have $1 million in the bank and rent is due tomorrow, you don't care, you're not thinking about it, right? So that person that has $1 million, they don't understand the financial struggle, they don't understand what it's like to feel that way. And food noise is very similar, where if you haven't dealt with that struggle, you can't really comprehend how difficult it is, or how much it really causes stress and anxiety,
Mhm.
and makes you feel like there's something broken in you.
So, how would you explain food noise? Like, could you give an example of a time recently or a time in the past that you experienced food noise, and to what degree?
Yeah, so I mean, the other day I made a video where I was just in my car. I was at a movie theater and I was thinking, well, shit, I want popcorn, but can I have popcorn? And I sat there for 40 minutes having an internal debate of whether or not I could eat popcorn. And that's, you know, for a lot of people, that's an internal struggle. And whether, that goes back to whether or not you're trying to lose weight. And when you're trying to lose weight, there's a lot more of that, that type of food noise. When you're somebody who's overweight, or just simply isn't focused on losing weight at the time, and you're dealing with food noise, generally it would just be like, I need to keep putting food in my mouth. I need to keep eating, because whatever I'm dealing with, whether that be stress, anxiety, depression, what
Hmm.
have you, all those sorts of things, they feel better when I'm getting that dopamine hit from food. So you don't really, I mean, you don't recognize that because it's not something that you're consciously, most people aren't consciously realizing that that's why they're seeking out food. They don't realize, I need a dopamine hit. They're thinking food makes me feel good,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, so for me currently, that popcorn situation, um I just made that video on the fly. I recorded it and I talked about how I was frustrated that all food is just numbers to me now. And then posthumously, when I was editing the video, I recognized that, holy shit, I still have food noise. I'm just dealing with it in a different way. I replace one food noise with another rather than the food noise of, you know, I need to be eating all the time. Now my food noise is, what's the calories in this? How do I fit this into my day? How do I make sure that I'm eating properly while still satisfying that for lack of a better term, internal demon, right? Like,
Yeah.
and as much as I feel like I've repaired my relationship with food in a lot of ways, that food noise is always going to be there. And that's just something that I have to recognize about myself and learn to control it the best I can, and
Yeah.
learn
Yeah.
to um, live with it and be okay with it.
Yeah, no, it sounds like the food noise is definitely like a stem of the inner critic that we have internally, right? Something that ties into maybe what we've perceived as authority figures or people that have been like influential in our lives that have made us think a certain way. And this could be even regarding just anything, but specifically in this case, food, right? So maybe it was your mom or your dad would make a comment when you ate a certain food, or let's say a partner or a friend of yours made a comment when you wanted more food, right? Like, oh, do you need another plate? Are you sure? Are you trying to lose weight, right? Or like, aren't you on a diet? Um,
Yeah.
I feel like all of those things probably feed into that food noise. Because again, I think I've experienced food noise, but obviously on a different scale. But I do remember there being a time where I was out with my family, and we went to a restaurant, and I remember this, and this is kind of when I knew that I had to like take a step back from tracking food, because I was trying to track a certain food, and obviously like it's hard to track entrees when you're eating at restaurants, right? Just
Yeah.
with like oils and just everything. But I wouldn't eat the food or start eating the food until I had actually officially tracked it into the app. Which again, like now that I've had time and experience, I wouldn't do that. I would just allocate a certain amount of calories to that meal and just like again look at it subjectively and be like, okay, it's probably going to be like this range to this range. But at the time, I didn't have that understanding of food, right? But also, I think too that was like again to talk about the food noise that you're speaking of, like definitely was very present then because like I would not start the meal until I had officially tracked the food in the app. And then once it was tracked in the app, I like had permission to eat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that food noise comes in a lot of different ways, and people don't really fully recognize it. It's definitely a large hormonal balance,
Yeah.
and there are certainly ways you can control it. Usually, it's by managing your diet better.
Hmm.
Something that I often discuss with clients and work with people on is trying to put more conscious thought into food. I feel like people in general don't put enough thought into the after effects of food. So like after you have a meal, 30 to 60 minutes after, kind of gauging, how satiated am I right now? How are my energy levels? Do I feel lethargic? Do I feel great? All those sorts of things where food has that impact on your body, and you need to, we're all individuals, and food uh, affects us in different ways,
Hmm.
and it takes a lot of time and not calculate methodical thinking of how all of these foods make you feel, to kind of get a better idea of how you can quiet your own food noise, because the more satiated you are, the better you feel. The more whole foods that you're eating and the less processed stuff you're eating usually will help with food noise. And it, of course, again, it's different for everybody. Your hormonal balance plays a very large role, and it's important that people know that it's not your fault, right? Like, it's not something that
Hmm.
you have to feel like uh you know you can't do anything about it. But also, if you're struggling to do something about it, that is perfectly normal, and most
Yeah.
people feel that way.
Yeah. No, it's like we discussed a little bit earlier too, right? Like if it is tied to your subconscious inner critic, like that is trauma. Like that's
For
tied to
sure.
trauma and tied to wounds, right? So like it makes sense that it's going to present in this way where you're second guessing yourself and your own actions because there's a pull, right? It's a tug. You're like, one part of you is like, yeah, I could have this, right? But then the other part of you is like, well, no, you're on a diet, you can't have that, right? Or like you're trying to lose weight, you can't have that, right? I don't know, I really like the term diet, but like you're trying to lose weight, like you're trying to again get to these goals. So I feel like just with that natural tug of war, you're going to experience so much inner dialogue, right? And I feel like it's hard sometimes to filter through what this inner dialogue actually means to you. And I think like this ties in really nicely to the holidays, because I'm sure a lot of people feel this on a very high altitude, right? Especially being around cookies, baked goods, foods that we normally don't eat, right? And
Not to
it's like,
mention all your family gifting you chocolate and stuff.
yes, and I saw you made a story on that too. It's like just because that you receive chocolate or you receive all of these foods from people, you don't have to eat it all by tomorrow. It's like you
Yeah.
could actually like pace yourself, enjoy it, have it over the course of like a couple of weeks, or if you want, like give some of it away. Like you don't have to eat it all or keep it around, right? Like for me, if I have it just all around, I will likely just pick away at it out of boredom.
Hmm.
So I know that I just like again, for me to be in a good place where I'm not going to have too much food around to tempt me, I will just like again limit how much I'm buying. It's like if I were to buy a big bag of Doritos and just have the Doritos here, I'm going to want to pick away at the Doritos probably over a couple of days. And before I know it, I'll be hitting the bottom. But if I
Yep.
want Doritos now, what I'll do is I'll buy like a small bag. It's like,
Yep.
okay, well, like I can still let myself have the Doritos. I can scan the bag. I can track the bag. Okay, I've had the Doritos today that I was craving. But again, I'm not like as tempted to destroy this whole family sized Doritos bag. And then by the end, you feel like you're in the pit of despair. You feel like, oh, I just ate this whole bag of Doritos just because I was bored or because like I wanted dopamine.
For sure. I think that controlling your environment is a very important aspect to managing your goals in general, whether whatever those goals are, to lose weight or to gain weight, or increase productivity, get a new job, whatever it may be. Whatever your goal is, your environment plays a large role. And if your goal is weight loss, managing your food environment is extremely important because, much like you said, I can't even tell you the last time I bought like a big bag of chips, because chips are a kryptonite for me. I
Mm-hmm.
will 100% destroy a family size bag of Doritos in a few days.
Sweet chili heat,
So
baby.
exactly the same. If I'm really craving something, I buy it in a single serving size, or a much smaller serving size.
Yeah.
And it's very important that you actually do that. A lot of people will have that mindset. Well, I'll just not buy it at all, and that's how you end up binging, because
Yeah.
you're craving Doritos and you can't have them, and so you just kind of get like an insatiable hunger over time.
Yeah.
So I always preach it's important to manage those cravings when they're at a 2 or a 3, rather than letting them get to a 10, because
Yeah.
once you're at a 10, it's you're eating half the kitchen, and then you're still going out and getting the Doritos that you want.
Yeah, and like you mentioned too, like I think it's really important to control your environment. And obviously there's a time and place to practice willpower and discipline, right? But I do think that we don't need to be practicing discipline and willpower all the time, right? Like
Hmm.
if you're filling up your house with a bunch of snacks that you know that you're going to have an internal conflict with all the time, you're making your life significantly harder on yourself. Like there's no question about that too. But I do think that again, like it's okay to have and the odd thing here and there, but we don't need to go over top where we're having that the so like we're getting to the point where we're finding that we're constantly having to test that willpower and that discipline constantly.
So yeah, I think that there's the interesting notion out there of, you only have so much discipline, you only have so much willpower, right?
Hmm.
And the more that you're testing it, the more that it will eventually break down. So when you can give yourself an easier environment, when you can remove that need of discipline, you're going to make it much easier for yourself. Like when you need to make the decision to go to the gym, for example, and
Yeah.
and you need to utilize your discipline there,
Yep.
or you need to get some schoolwork done or read a book or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
um, your discipline has a limited amount of use each day. You only have so much energy, right? And discipline requires energy. And
I agree.
the more that you're using it throughout the day, the more energy that you're using, and the more that you're going to struggle to remain disciplined.
Yeah.
So by controlling your environment and making that easier on yourself, you don't have to exercise that energy, and you can use it towards better things.
Yeah, and I'd say like practice discipline and willpower in a controlled environment, right? Where you can. So to kind of give layers to this too, right? If you can keep your place that you live, a place where you're not having to practice willpower and discipline all the time, it gives you more of like a chance when you are in social environments where you are choosing to. Right. If you're constantly in a place at home where you're constantly like in an internal conflict, an internal tug of war about wanting to eat those Doritos or eat those Pringles, right? It's challenging, and likely when you go to that social outing, you're going to have less ability, or you're going to be more likely to collapse, and you're going to be more likely to feed into it. So I do think that, again, if you are able to practice it at home, where you're just like, hey, like, don't fill up your place with a bunch of snacks that you know that you like and that you have a hard time stopping with, right? Because if you know that you're going to go to social outings, especially like around Christmas time, right? Like if you're having to practice a ton of discipline and willpower when you're at a social outing to not eat the entire fleet of cookies or cakes or whatever it is, like, again, like, just don't also stock up at home to the point where like you're practicing that at home and then you're also going to this social outing to do the same thing.
For sure. You mentioned something about Pringles, and that made me think of a reel I saw the other day. Some dumb video about a dude saying how potatoes are like not in like potatoes are like the seventh ingredient in Pringles, and I had to Google it because obviously that seemed ridiculous. Potatoes are, of course, the first ingredient in Pringles, and I think that's a hilarious look at how like social media is with food and nutrition and health in general, because
Hmm.
people recognize that by making statements like that, it allows them to go viral, because people are like, oh my god, did you know there's no potatoes in Pringles? And then they're sharing it with all their friends, and these videos go viral. And I think that's an interesting statement to how you need to kind of have a more critical thinking mind when it comes to using social media and to consuming content, because
Yeah.
so much of it is just so ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you need to fact check these things yourself. Even my content, if there's something I say that you think is wrong, fact check it yourself, think about it
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. Yeah. Don't just, and this kind of applies for just like everything, but don't just follow something because you saw a video of it. Like, don't
hmm
just think that, oh, this must be the way that things are because I saw a video that somebody said it was. Again, like what Jesse's saying, fact check it, look at multiple different sources, right? Trusted sources, and figure out, make your own decision from there, right? Don't just see a video and then try it because that's all based off of somebody's opinion or perspective or their own personal experience.
It's also really important when you're trying to like fact check something, you have to really consider tonality when you're like, say, Googling something, for example. Like, let's say, I'm going to use the carnivore diet as an argument, but let's say I watch a video on carnivore diet. Like, it seems great. I think that it's going to be fantastic for me. And, but I'm a little on the fence, and I want to get more information. So I decide to go to Google. Now, if I were to put into Google, um, benefits of the carnivore diet, it's going to confirm my bias. It's going to provide me exactly what I want to see, exactly what I want to hear. Now, if I go to Google and I put in, you know, um, how healthy is the carnivore diet, or what are the overall effects of the carnivore diet, or,
Yep.
depending on how you phrase that, you're going to get very different results. And it's extremely important that when you're Googling something or trying to fact check something, that you understand you have to use neutral terms. Because if you
Hmm.
use something like, what are the benefits of this, you're only going to confirm the bias. That's just guaranteed going to happen. So, social media and um, the health space is very strange, because there's so much intentional misinformation, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's very when you're fact checking things, you really have to consider how you're doing so, and again, use your best critical thinking, because I think it's crazy to me that anytime I post about like a diet soda, the amount of people that like I saw a post the other day that was like saying that diet soda was worse than alcohol. Alcohol is literally, quite literally, a poison in your body, and to say that diet soda is worse is astronomically
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah. I think people are also basing a lot of their thoughts or opinions around something off of very old research and information,
100%.
right? Like maybe there was
Or
something that
they
was
just
put out,
don't even understand the research in the first place.
right? Which, like, again, with diet pops or these zero sugar drinks, right? Like, there was a lot of stuff maybe in the 80s, but like it's 2025 almost. It's, there's been 45 years of current research. And that's like, it's one of those things that's highly researched as well. And a lot of people in the space have researched it, have spoken on it too, and there aren't any detrimental components of drinking diet pop or zero sugar drinks.
I believe aspartame is if it's not the most, I believe it is the most researched ingredient. But if it's not, it's one of the top few for sure.
Yeah,
And with that much study going into it, if there were negative health effects, it wouldn't be available. Like,
no,
I don't even understand that argument. Like, sure, people like to say like, "Oh, the government's out to get you," or something like along those lines, or big food is paying for all these studies. Like, guys, that's not how clinical research works.
no,
You
no,
can't,
and
just because you're a big food company, you can't control the outcome of a study. Those studies are very clearly laid out that just because you're funding it does not mean that it's going to influence the result of this study.
yeah, yeah, and I think again a good talking point here too is it all comes down to moderation, right? Like if you're drinking a full 2 liter of diet pop a day, maybe that'll become an issue. But like if you're having a glass or if you're having a can, it's like there's gonna be no major issue with it, no major detriment with it. It's like again, it's like anything else. Like moderation is going to be key. It's like it's no different with the holiday season. It's no different with anything else too, right? Like a matter of factoring these things into your life, being able to actually like not live in a box, have a social component of your life, go out, share, make memories with friends, with family, actually live life. Like that's really what it comes down to, right? As long as you're not on the extreme end of it where you're eating everything in sight, drinking a 2 liter a day, it's like you will be fine.
I've definitely had periods where I drink more than a 2 liter a day, but I don't anymore. Uh, but I mean, ultimately, yeah, anything in moderation. It's you know, I think that trying to trying to manipulate how you eat in a way where it's like, I'm cutting this out completely, I'm never having this again. And if you just straight up don't enjoy diet soda, that's fine. Don't consume it then. If you like water, drink water. Hell, water is great for you. But if you enjoy it and you cut it out just because you're like, well, it's poison, or water is better for me, like, having one a day is not making a difference. And ultimately it's 0 calories. Like, that's a freaking cheat code. Come on.
Yeah, and like end of the day too, people have to consider the nuance of this, right? When you are in a situation or when you are in a place where let's say you've been dieting for a while, that 120 calories can make a difference. Or that 170 calories, like that could be like
A
a
massive
couple,
difference.
yeah, it could be like a couple servings of egg whites, right? It could be quite a bit. It could be like a full serving of berries or whatever. So for people to think like
170
it's,
calories is like 2 cups of berries.
yeah, exactly. So it's like, so when you think about again, when people talk about how the difference of diet pop versus regular pop, I mean, like, sure, it is maybe only 170, 120 calories, depending on what you're drinking to your average person. But for somebody that is in more of a unique circumstance, or a specific situation where they have been cutting for a long time or dieting for a while, and they don't want to make any big drop in their calories, that like 120 calorie leeway or 170 calorie leeway could give them the space to have more food. So it's like,
I mean, if you even let's assume, for example, you're drinking one a day over the course of a week. That's what you know, what is that? Just under about 1,200 calories, I believe. So yeah, I mean that means over the course of a month, that's a 1 pound difference. More than that.
if we're basing it off of 120, it's like
I think you
840
said
a week.
170. I think
Yeah,
you
'cause
said
I think
170.
I think I've seen some that are about there. Yeah, so that's like yeah, 1190.
Yeah, so 1,200 calories a week. That's over the course of a month. That's 4,800. That's a pound and a quarter, pound and a third, something like that. That's
Yeah,
that's significant, and that's literally 1 can of soda a day, and a lot of people drink more than one, and
adds up.
often, you know, I know when I was, for lack of a better term, fat as shit, I drank a lot of soda and Slurpees and ice cream and a lot of other things that were not great for me. But my point is, literally just switching to diet soda at the start there probably was saving me upwards of 700 calories a day just from not drinking regular full sugar soda. Like that's a crazy number.
Which is like substantial if you're eating nutrient dense foods. Like,
For sure. And I was obviously on the extreme of it.
yeah.
But even, for the average person that does drink soda as a somewhat more common thing, I would say it's
Mhm.
pretty common for people to drink at least one a day, which
Yeah.
is a significant amount
Yeah, and
of calories, that is.
to play devil's advocate too, right? If you have the allowance for it,
Sure.
let's say you like having a certain pop and you have the caloric allowance for it, and if you've managed to find a way to fit it into your calories, then by all means, right? But
Hmm.
I think what we're discussing here is if you're trying to limit your intake of a pop on a daily or weekly basis and you're trying to kind of segue into a place where you're just having less pop in general, then a diet or zero option could be great for you because it's going to help with satiety, it's going to help with curbing cravings, it's going to help a lot with um, I think the carbonation too is going to help with satiety as well. But I think
Hmm.
also just like again, like it's a nice little thing to have at the end of your day, right? Like if you have a full day and you're like, oh, I have my diet pop for later, like it's nice to like finish your day or have that be something that you're doing later on.
Yeah, and I think it also circles back to my what I said earlier about being very cognizant about how food makes you feel. Because for some
Yeah.
people, it won't be great for you. For some people, maybe it makes you hungrier. Maybe it increases your sugar cravings. For me, I know because I do the internal thought. But for me, it reduces sugar cravings,
Hmm.
and for a
Hmm.
lot of people, it will because it gives you that sweet, the sweet treat feeling without calories, which is like honestly such a hack. Like I can't even fathom having to go to zero diet soda completely because I need that outlet of being able to satisfy that craving for 0 calories. Otherwise, I would be eating a lot more calories.
No, 1,000%. So for somebody that you would say struggles with food noise, right?
Mm.
What would be some strategies that you would suggest for them that have worked for you, or like let's say have worked for clients of yours? So I feel like food noise is probably very common, but people probably just don't know the severity of it and know how to work through it.
For sure, it definitely goes back to that being very methodical about your food and understanding how food makes you feel because at the end of the day, food noise is generally coming from that hormone imbalance and from a need for dopamine. Um, the the obvious thing to do is to make sure that the foods that you're eating make you feel good and that you're eating majority whole foods because whole foods tend to make you feel better than processed. But
Yeah.
that's not saying to cut out processed food completely. You still should enjoy your life, but to limit it and moderation.
Mhm.
But another important thing to do is to try to make sure that you're um, losing my train of thought here. I had a thing.
It's okay.
I'm gonna
We're
need to
gonna
cut
throw
this out
the
in editing.
we're gonna throw the buffering logo here, like the
Yeah,
thing you see on YouTube, where you're like, it's loading, it's loading, it's loading, it's coming. So
I totally lost my train of thought there.
that happens. That happens. Um,
Uh,
because what I would think, if we're trying to talk about food noise, right? If somebody's constantly dealing with this inner critic, their subconscious thoughts are kind of running the show, right? Um, and they're constantly like butting heads with what they want versus what they think they want, right? Then I feel like it's often going to come down to a lot of things. It's going to come down to um, probably like you're gonna have to evaluate your mental state, right? You're gonna have to look at what things are going on behind the scenes, what kind of external stressors do you have in your life, what things are playing a fact into that too, right? And what's pushing you towards food as an emotional comfort in general. And I think this kind of ties into the conversation we had recently on the previous podcast about emotional eating, right? If you're leaning towards food as an outlet for many reasons, or let's say a very strong reason, there has to be reason reasons or a strong reason as to why. And that often might require you speaking to a professional. It might be a matter of you seeking some sort of help, figuring out, again, why you're leaning towards food, or on what we've discussed today, too, why you're at the point where you aren't allowing yourself to have certain foods, and why you've gotten to a point where you just see food as something that you need to do for the case of survival, and why it's lost the social component to it. Because I do think that there is obviously going to be a social component to food. Like, take the holidays as a great example, right? Or going to a movie. I mean, what beats movie popcorn? Let's be real. And then
Nothing.
also it's just like, right, nothing beats movie popcorn. So it's a matter of figuring out, like, how can you still have these social components to food, but also still live a life where you are fueling your body primarily with good foods that are allowing you to get towards your goals.
So I'm going to go back to the thought that I was forgetting because you
Sure.
hit the nail on the head. My thought was you need to control emotional eating, and the way you do that is via allowing yourself to feel your feelings. And that sounds simple and obvious because you should feel your feelings, but for me and for a lot of people, they use food as a way to escape those feelings, as a way to find dopamine that their body is telling them I need this because I don't want to think about what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's understandable. Um I dealt with a lot of trauma as a child that it took a long time for me to get past. And that's largely why I got so big because I dealt with depression and anxiety, and that dopamine and that comfort and that coping mechanism that food provided was my lifeline. That was how I existed. That was how I got through every single day.
Yeah.
And um, to be able to heal that and get past that, I had to recognize that this is why I'm doing those things, and I had to put in that effort of allowing myself to feel those feelings and process them and get through them,
Hmm.
which is so much easier said than done. Take it from me. But when you come out the other side, you will be much better off.
Yeah. And I feel like, just to add like another layer to this too, it's something that I've been working on and working on with my clients too, is trying to eliminate the guilt and the shame around eating these foods as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like a large component of these emotional related issues around food is stemming foods as good or bad. And
Yep.
we've discussed it a lot in detail too, but like, again, to reiterate, because I think it's really important to talk about, is there really is no good or bad food, right? It's
100%.
the moderation and the frequency that we're having these foods in. If we're having a certain amount of this food every day, it becomes bad because of how frequently we're having the food, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, there's no good or bad, and I found that something that's worked really well for me and for my clients too is giving yourself permission to have certain foods, right? Like, quickly, if you're going to go out with some friends, hey, you know what? I'm allowing myself to have some wings with my friends and enjoy watching this game or enjoy this social outing, right? And then after the fact, after you have a meal, hey, you know what? It's okay that I had this,
Mhm.
because the opposite end of that is guilt, is shame. You're making yourself feel awful for having these foods. But I think again, it's a matter of creating this level of understanding around the foods that you're having, but also for yourself too, giving yourself some grace, because I feel like a lot of the issues that come from this come from our inner critic and the inner dialogue that we talk to ourselves with around the foods that we're having, not so much as the foods themselves.
For sure. First of all, for me, I like to always frame things as rather than good or bad, it's simply either nutritionally dense or calorically dense or both.
Mm-hmm.
And just understanding the moderation and the way that you have to fit those foods into your lifestyle. But it's incredibly important that you still eat food that fuels your soul. People like to make the ridiculous notion of food is just fuel. Food is not just fuel. Food is social. It is built into how we celebrate things. It's built into how we connect with people. It is so important in our society, and that's okay. You don't have to feel bad about wanting to go out and get wings with your friends once in a
Not at
while.
all.
And that's part of that healing process and recognizing that it's okay. And there's a very interesting idea about the three me's that I love to think about all the time and kind of use as a method to handle these situations. And that's essentially that there's past you, there's present you, and there's future you. And you have to always look at future you as your best fucking friend. You need to treat that person like you would your best friend. You need to make your decisions with future you in mind. You need to always be doing things with that future you in mind. But at the same time, you have to recognize your value of current you. You need to care about what current you is processing and what you're feeling. And then
Mm-hmm.
you need to be thankful to past you, and you need to give your past you some grace. And most importantly, you need to forgive past you for anything that you feel like you've done wrong. And that's a very hard step to take. But once you kind of get, like for me, it was extremely difficult to forgive myself for getting to 500 pounds. That process, that alone took me several, almost a year to kind of get to a place where I've truly forgiven myself and feel like I can love myself again, because it's so hard to forgive yourself for something so detrimental to your health and to your life.
Mm-hmm.
And on a much smaller scale, you need to, like you said, if you go out with your friends and have wings, you need to recognize that, you know that was okay. I enjoyed myself, and I don't have to feel any sort of guilt around that. And that goes
Yeah.
back to kind of thanking past you for making those decisions,
Mm-hmm.
because now you have that memory with your friends, and you wouldn't have had that if you were so worried about food.
Yeah. And I think I saw the video from, was it Mike? Mike Needs a Plan? Yeah. I
Probably.
think he made a post about, he was showing this other guy who made a video about, like, oh, I used to look at this old version of me and wonder what was going on, but I was just fat or whatever. And he was like going off about how, like, well, if if you didn't have that old version of you, you wouldn't be who you are today,
I
right?
know the
And
video he's
like,
talking about. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like that is so important, so true, because again, you could look at old versions of yourself, and I think this is where the issue is in society, right? Is when people look at an old version of themselves, they like almost want to like kill it. They're like,
Hmm.
kill it with fire. Like this is
Yep.
something that I just want to like. I want to wash off the face of the earth, right? But again, like if you didn't have that old version of you, you
You
would
wouldn't
not
be the
be
current one.
you wouldn't be who you are today. You wouldn't be sitting here right now, right? So
Hmm.
you got to think about again, like maybe you could look at it in hindsight and be like, these things weren't good. These things happened, and like that's okay. But it's a
A
matter of
hundred
like,
percent.
yeah, it's a matter of you like, are you wanting to take action, and are you wanting to like do things to be like happier with yourself and keep that future you in mind, or are you wanting to use it as a reason to like not change?
For sure. And that goes back to um, forgiving that past you and respecting them and thanking them for, like I profusely thank my past self for having the courage and the wherewithal to get to where I am.
Yeah.
And past me is the one that did all that work. Current me is the one that has to do all the work going forward, and future me is my best fucking friend who I will continue to work for so that he gets the future that he wants,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that's an important concept to kind of get your head around. It is that whole, having doing what you can to satisfy all three versions of you, because all three of them deserve love, they all deserve respect, and they all deserve for you to give everything you can and to make yourself a priority, because sometimes for a lot of people it is incredibly hard to make yourself a priority, and you're not
Yeah.
going to satisfy that future you's desires unless you are making yourself a priority.
Yeah. And I think to like kind of add another perspective on this too is I think sometimes we often focus too much on the past version of ourselves or the future version of ourselves, and it strips us of the present you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we think about almost like we tend to ruminate on the past, or we tend to fixate about the future and get anxious about the future because we don't know what's going to happen, or we don't know if this is the right thing to do, or what this is going to cause, or we think about something stupid that we said at the grocery store the other day or the gym or whatever, right? But again, it's like what really matters is like right now, like
100%.
this current present moment, like what has
Mm-hmm.
happened, right? And what is going to happen. But it's important to like again, the future is great to think about 100% because I think again the future can provide you with like a north star, right? It can give you a direction of where you want to go, but without current and present actions that is not going to happen.
100%.
So people have to think about like again having a north star or a couple things that you really want to work towards, again like trajectory wise, but they have to think about what things can I do today and tomorrow to get me towards that. And that ties into like again just being more present in general. And I can speak to that because like I wasn't present for a very long time. And once you realize how to be present, your life is more fulfilled because you are able to like again absorb and take everything in as it comes.
100%. I mean, it's kind of like, when I said you have to treat your future self like your best friend,
Yeah.
you have to treat current self like your best friend too. You
Yeah.
have to you have to care about you more than you care about anybody else. And that's, that may sound um um not great. Like, if you're a parent, of course you're going to want to care about your child more than you care about yourself. I get that, but if you don't prioritize yourself, if you don't focus on being your best self, then how
Mm-hmm.
can you be your best self for your kids either?
You have to prioritize sovereignty and like independence. You have to
Mm-hmm.
prioritize you have to prioritize your values, your goals, your ambitions, your desires, your hobbies, because I do think that again you see it a lot in um, parents as they get older, right? Like the kids move out of the house and they're like, "Whoa, who am I?" Right? Or
Mm-hmm.
somebody gets out of a relationship that they've been in for a long time, they're like, "Who am I?" Right? Because you kind of almost lose that sense of sovereignty or like that sense of independence because you have become so codependent on people around you, right? So I think it's really important to like again within all of this too to just focus on like taking care of yourself and prioritizing yourself is number one. And I don't think what you said before is bad either. I think the way that it could be perceived is different, but I do think that again what you're trying to get at here is you have to take care of yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean,
sometimes
it's
that's
it's
go
like in an airplane, right? You got to put
yeah.
your own mask on first.
Yeah, and
That's just life.
yeah, not everybody's going to like agree with you and like that's okay. I think we live in a society where we want to appease and please everybody, right? We want our decisions and our actions to make everybody happy. But like if you're truly taking care of yourself, you are going to piss some people off.
Sure, but if you're not truly taking care of yourself, if you're not your own priority, then you can't take care of other people either.
1000%. Yeah, and
Yep.
this comes into coaching, this comes into everything, right? If you aren't able to do things that fill your cup, do things that make you able to actually like again be your best self in relationships, in friendships, to your family, on social media even, you're not going to be able to sustain it for very long.
hmm and even if you can, you're not your best self, so you're not giving those people the best version of yourself either. And that's not to say like if you're a parent, you can you of course you can be a fantastic parent and not be making yourself a priority. But if you are making yourself a priority and you are that best version of yourself, or at least trying to be that best version of yourself, there's a good chance that you'll be slightly better at it because you'll be happier and more fulfilled and more, you know,
Yeah.
more present, for lack of a better word.
I think the big difference of the wording here is going to be things that you are versus things that you do, right?
hmm
I think it's like again, somebody might hear themselves saying like I am like it is my role to be a mother, right? That's like what I
For
identify
sure.
as. But like they are a mother, right? That's something that they are for someone, right?
hmm
But it's also like, okay, well, like who are they on a deep surface level, right? Who are they when it comes down to their values, their goals, their ambitions, their hobbies, right? And I'm not saying to, for context, guys, I'm not saying to be an awful person and just be like, like nobody fucking exists, nobody matters. It's just me, this egocentric person where the world revolves around them. I'm not saying that, but I think there is a healthy balance to be had of taking care of yourself, setting healthy boundaries with people, but also with yourself, and still being able to be compassionate and empathetic towards people that are important to you.
Yeah, I would like to clarify, just because I'm saying to make yourself your own priority does not mean that other people cannot also be priorities. It just you have to you have to have that balance, and you have to make sure that you're caring about you, because if you're not focused on your own fulfillment, if you're not focused on your own health and your own self-love and your own goals and values, then you can't expect to provide those people with the best version of yourself, and the best version of yourself is what they deserve and what you deserve.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I'm sure you could probably relate to this too, right? But it can be challenging because we want to almost set these expectations on ourselves, probably a little bit unconsciously and unintentionally, that we have to be fulfilling these deadlines, we have to be fulfilling these specific things. And it can be easy to let ourselves slip and slide, right? We could think about, okay, well, these things need to be done. Me taking time for myself doesn't need to happen. But it's important to remember that these things most certainly do need to happen.
Yep.
And you do need to still make sure that you are taking time for yourself. And taking time for yourself can depend on the day. I think it's important to differentiate this too, right? Like find things that are going to be different depending on how much time you have for yourself. So think about multiple things that can fill your cup, right? Like for
hmm
me, I think about if I have half an hour one day, for example, let's say it's a busy day and I have half an hour, that's going to look different than if I have half of a day off. And it's like obviously
100%. Yeah.
the things that you're going to be doing are going to be different depending on how much time you have. But I think it's important to have different things so then that way you can kind of fill in the gaps differently when you do have more time to actually do things for yourself.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So to wrap this thing up, what would
Yeah.
be some advice that you would give to people going into the holiday season?
Enjoy Christmas, or whatever holiday you celebrate. Enjoy it. Don't feel guilty. Eat the food that you want to eat. Don't feel like you need to stay on track. At the end of the day, whatever you do on any single day is not going to influence your goals. It's what you do on the other 364 days of the year. Um, just because you're on days off and you're with family doesn't mean you need to eat all of the food in the house, which is something I was very guilty of. And like I said in the video that we mentioned earlier, just because somebody gives you, a box of chocolates doesn't mean you need to eat it all in 2 days, which again is something I used to be guilty of. Um, and Christmas is a very difficult thing to walk because it can very, very easily lead to binges. Like
Mm-hmm.
significantly higher chance of binging than almost any other time of the year. because you have those excuses for yourself. You have the, oh well, I'm on days off, I'm with family, and there's all these baked goods or whatever desserts out, and you're just kind of standing at a table grazing on them,
Yeah.
and it's kind of, you know, on Christmas Day or on whatever holiday you celebrate, if you're doing those things, okay, enjoy it. That's awesome. Don't feel guilty about it. But now when it's December 26th or 27th or 21st or whatever day,
Hmm.
why are you still doing those things? Right? You need to
Yeah.
recognize that you need to be in control, and that at the end of the day, the holidays are one day or maybe two, depending on your family situation and whatnot,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's okay. Enjoy those times, but make sure that you're getting back on track. Make sure that you're not being egregious about it. You can still enjoy the holidays, but you don't need 3 slices of cheesecake, you know. And
Yeah.
I would have probably eaten four.
Yeah, no, I think again, it's really important to just think about the holiday season is, people tend to think about it as this 2 weeks we're just off, which like
Hmm.
that's again, I think that's kind of what we've learned as a society, but it's really only the matter of maybe 5 days, right? We have like Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. Some people have Boxing Day off, right? And then we have New Year's
Did
Eve
you
and
know
New Year's
Boxing
Day.
Day isn't a thing in the States?
Really?
I was shocked when I found that out.
Okay, so
Apparently,
here
yeah.
it is.
For Americans that don't know, Boxing Day is December 26th, and it's essentially Canadian Black Friday. Like for you
Yeah.
guys, you have Black Friday. We have Black Friday as well, but Boxing Day is essentially our biggest sale day of the year.
Yeah, this is like, hey, anything you didn't get for Christmas, buy it now.
Yeah, yeah. When I found out that wasn't a thing in the States, I was legitimately shocked. I thought that was like, I would have assumed that we got it from them, because Black Friday is obviously an American thing because it happens after Thanksgiving in
Yeah.
America.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Interesting.
um, yeah, interesting thought there.
But I
Um,
also want to throw it out here too. Like, I realize that the holidays are a challenging time for a lot of people. So if you want to reach out, just like again, just to talk, I'm here. I'm sure Jesse could do the same thing. So if any of you guys are having a tough time over the holidays, if you want some advice or anything just going into the holiday season, we're more than happy to provide that for you guys. And thanks again for listening to the podcast. We appreciate the support, and we would love to see you guys all at the next one.
underscore body by Bryce, progressive overhaul, or Inner Shift Podcast. Follow us on socials, and hit us up if you need help with the holidays.
Happy to help, guys.
Have a good one.